This is a large spectrum of ages, from say birth to 103, who would like to come up and try children's sermon out. This is like the most anxious part of my entire day. So any kids and the 3 volunteers of the adulthood. Want to come up? Anybody? Really, it's okay. I'm not known to bite. I want you to stand up here. Anyone else want to be a kid? Oh man, okay. I need the three adult volunteers willing to stand up, stand and look at them. Come over here. Be kind of in the center. You're the stars. Is that like a spider jacket? That's a cool jacket. Man. Better 3 adult volunteers. You can stand here. Oh, Robin's coming up too. I know what hers is, I think. Okay. Maybe. Who knows? Only known you for 22 years. Might be something I don't know. Who knows? Okay. Now, this is like a little test. Ready? Now, do you know what it means to have something in common? What it means? Okay. How are these people all alike? You guys can join in. Let's see. What do you think? Do they all have ears? How many ears do they have each? Want to check? Okay. Yeah, our hair is not covering ears. Do they have 2 noses or 1? 1 nose. They all have eyes, right? They all have feet. Yes, and they're their feet, you can tell. What else about them do they, let's see, they all have hands. Hands, please. You guys all have hands? You all have hands? You guys all have hands? Raise your hands. Okay. Don't raise your feet. That will make perhaps an injury, and then my malpractice insurance doesn't cover that. What else do they have in common? Okay. 2 of them have glasses, and if Robin was really, she has glasses too. We all have glasses. Okay. Now, here's the trick. If you can guess something about them that you don't know by looking at them. What do you think? What do you think can you guess what's different about them? It's only they know? Any ideas? No. All right, Robin, you can start. What do we not know about you?
I was a power lifter at Temple University.
Yes, I'm married to a power lifter. Yeah, yes, it's true. So needless to say, yes, ma'am. It's good. Okay. See, you know what that means? She lifted like really heavy weights. Like really heavy weights. And Erin still has the t-shirt of the powerlifting team, and everybody wants to buy it from her. Okay, so believe it or not, she's just like everybody else, except she's a powerlifter. Next.
I'm a big baseball fan, and my dream was always to play for the Boston Red Sox, but it didn't work out.
Oh. So, without steroids, though, right? You're going to play clean.
Oh,
no roids, okay. So, she wanted to be a baseball player of the best team in America, I will say. And Jerry?
And I love gardening, especially flowers and vegetables. I would grow them year-round.
So, did you know that about these folks before they told you? So here's the message. We look at people and we think we know them, but we really don't. And if you think about those gospel stories, Jesus always asks people, so who are you? So if you want to know someone better and know how God made them special, don't just look at them. That's just a guess. Ask them something like, ask your friends, what makes you special? What makes you special? What makes you different? Parents, what makes them special? Kind heart. All right. What makes your 2 kids special? That we wouldn't even, we don't know it. What makes them special? Oh. And moving down the line here, what makes these 2 folks special? In the back. So, God makes us all special, and part of our task is to ask people what makes you special. And with that, let's pray a prayer. And I don't have that big thing to show us. The Lord's Prayer is a prayer that's special for Christians. It binds us all. So let's share it together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thanks, folks. You can go back. Or children's church, or that way. The magic door opens. It's the TARDIS. It's Doctor Who. No. Jokingly told Chris, I preach about once every 3 years, so I have 156 sermons to give right now. So, for those of you who don't know me, and some of you who do, more of an introduction, I'm Jeff Hamilton. I wear 2 hats in my professional life, in my personal life. I've been ordained in the UCC 35 years. This June 3rd, which is hard to imagine. It's been 35 years, and I've been a social worker since '84. I've been a licensed clinical social worker since '97. I've been doing although I served churches for a few years, that's not really where I cook well. I kind of burn things there, I think. I don't cook well there. I've been doing pastoral counseling full-time since '83. I was a trauma chaplain out in Dayton, Ohio, and was blessed to be at a phenomenal place that asked me if I would create a pastoral counseling center. So I've been doing that. Education, you can go on my website. One thing I will say, one of the odd things about me, I'm an odd guy. I've been old a long time. At the age of 17, I had this idea for a counseling center. It is still in operation. Had I bought stock, I'd be living in Bimini right now and out of the rain. So I've been doing mental health work my entire life in various ways. What is ironic about today is I actually mistyped the scriptures that I wanted for today, which is kind of cool because the last one, the end of it, was the one I was going to talk about. And last night I was here practicing the sermon saying, God, I wish I put that in there. Oh, well. These are 2 healing stories. What we're going to talk about today are the healing stories and how in the healing miracles we are given the models of the behavior which is healing as well as the effect of being the healer. Legion, the man who had the 12-year hemorrhage, and the woman, Legion, the man who was crazy in the eyes of the world, and the woman who had the 12-year hemorrhage. A little story. So a woman she's been bleeding for about 12 years. Therefore, she can't go in the temple, can't go home, can't go in the city. She's isolated. And for 12 years, men, notice the gender, men have been telling her what to do. If you would just do the following things, you would be healed. And if you're not healed, well, it's your fault. So for 12 years, she tried everything. She gave up everything that she owned to be healed. You know, she just couldn't get it right. She walks up to Jesus and touches his cloak. And she's healed. The power in that scripture is that phrase, and he felt the power leave him. Because ministry of healing can be both exhausting and exhilarating. But it is exhausting. To give of ourselves so others can be more is tiring. And it is a great model that in the most insignificant ways, people touch Jesus' cloak. Whether it be when we're serving breakfast on Saturday and we smile at that one person who hasn't had a smile at them in a month, or we call someone by name, or when I was living in Tennessee, I was always amazed of how some of the older non-white persons would kind of hide from me when we came to a door. And I would open the door, and I had some people who said to me, this is the first time a white man's held the door for me. How we don't know how we touch lives. So ministry takes from us. And then there's Legion. And now note, Legion was my doctoral study, so if you have about 285 pages to read, you too can read all about Legion. Or just go on Amazon and buy my book. Publishers say sell your book. Legion was crazy in the eyes of the world. He was isolated. He was probably a renegade pig salesman. If you know the story about the pigs, forget the pigs, they don't really matter. But if you were Jewish and you sold pigs, how many friends would you have? So, like we do now, they put him as far away from the town as they could put him. They put him in the cemetery. What did we used to do with state mental hospitals? Put them as far away from the cities as we possibly could. We put them in Wernersville. I like Wernersville. Nice monastery there. But it was pretty much in the hinterlands of Lancaster County. We used to always isolate the mentally ill. We would make these buildings that looked like they were prisons, because they really were. In his isolation, he went mad, as any of us would. So, this is the other Bible of my life. Does anyone know what this wonderful book is? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness, DSM 5.0. So let me see. Diagnosis 300. No, that's too much like me. Hoarding disorder. That's one. That's always. I just like flipping through it and see all these things that we like to name. Agoraphobia. Okay, we do that one. Everyone's in here. We all have a diagnosis. I mean, it's true. It's true. We're all a little bit, goofy in our own little way. How many of you have had a loss of a loved one and have been sad? 309.28, adjustment disorder with mixed emotional features. Mental illness. How many of you have been sad for maybe 6 weeks? Not real sad, but like a -2. Just can't quite get out of it. 300.4. It used to be called dysthymia, now they've changed its name. How many of you have been socially anxious when you walked into a room thinking, I got to get out of here? I'm sorry you're mentally ill. Whether we like it or not, we have all faced mental illness. Most of us, we face it and we move on. Well, for some of us, it's not that easy. Now, I actually like this book. It isn't great bedtime reading, but it's interesting to read, because all this does, all mental illness is some people, used to be men basically, would sit and they would decide what symptoms, what behaviors meant a person had a mental illness, and they made this manual. And it was originally made so if I was talking to a colleague, and I said somebody had, let me pick one here, that's not too odd, because or just was depressed or was cyclothymic, we would know what it meant. The difficulty is now in our culture, she's just bipolar. No, maybe she's just upset. We have used this terminology and we've made it part of our vernacular. So, just think about this. If you're sick from the neck up, no one talks to you. But if you're sick from the neck down, sorry about your heart disease. How you doing? We'll be compassionate. How's your knee? We'll ask about knees, or we'll ask about hips. If someone's had their gallbladder out, we'll ask, how are you doing after surgery? But if someone has an illness from the neck up, we leave them alone. I have a pacemaker. His name is Pete the pacemaker. Because my mother, when she was living, never knew about it for the last 9 years of her life. Because if she did, it would add one more thing to her pile of things to deal with. But she had coronary care psychosis. She was psychotic in the hospital for about 3 months, which is a mental illness that occurs typically in ICUs. But no one would talk about it. If within our culture, if you're sick, if you have an illness, a brain illness from the neck up, we pretend like you don't exist. Because they scare us. So that's the issue. Legion was crazy because people pushed him away. If you have a mental illness, we hear things like, buck up, get over it. What's the problem? Everyone goes through that. Everyone's had a dog that died. Yeah, but it wasn't my dog. With mental illness, we dismiss people's pain and tell them to basically grow up and get over it. Because frankly, mental illness scares us. I've been doing my career. I was realizing driving back from my consulting gig yesterday, or Thursday, that I've spent about 45,000 hours sitting with patients. So, back to Legion. So tell me, this is a quiz, what does Jesus do that heals him? Isn't it a trick question? I'm sorry? He accepts him, but he does something. He says to him, what is your name? Tell me your story. And in the telling of the story, he became normal. Did he still face his mental illness? Sure, he did. Still have to live with that. That was not going to go away. But the healing was in the simple asking, who are you? What do you need? Tell me your story. My name is Legion, for I am many. And in that moment, the man was resurrected. His old way of living died. That old self-definition of I am a sick, crazy pig salesman that nobody wants to be near. They bring me this cup of stale water and this. They would bring him these barrels of the swine feed to feed him because he wasn't worth having food. But now he didn't have to do it alone. Now somebody was there to honestly say, what is your story? He was no longer defined by whatever the DSM was back then. He was defined by who he was. Quick story. I wasn't going to tell this one, but I think I will. I have a couple clients who let me talk about him. Kathy was a client of mine. She was one of my first clients. I saw her for 14 years. First, paramedic, man, if you were injured, you would want her there, but otherwise, she was basically a blob of protoplasm. Her history was ungodly awful. About 4 years into therapy, which for her was a good start. We're just starting therapy. She decides to get her associates in social work. I was pleased. And then she got her bachelor's, with her second language was sign. And then she got her master's summa from Ohio State. And she now runs a division of the mental health department of a state. Does she still have borderline personality? Yes, she does. And I have no doubt she still wrestles with it. But I also know that in our work, she became normal. The world is so dismissive of people who have mental illness. We deny the extent of it. We refuse to really look at it. We refuse to look at what we can do to help. Is Chris here? Oh, hi, Chris. It's good to have you here. But you'll be leaving soon. And that's where we come in. In 1 year or so, we will welcome someone new here. And we have a responsibility for that person to have a vision of ministry to ask them to lead us into. We don't have a year to wait. We have to find a vision of ministry that when we're interviewing candidates, we can say, this is what we want to do. Can you do it with us? In the 1950s, if a pastor said, please do us, churches snapped a salute and said, yes, sir, usually, sir, and we did it. But now it's different. We, for the next year or less, have to figure out what is our next objective? What is our next ministry setting? We need to seek leaders who will lead us to that ministry site. The next 10 years of our life. Now, I'm giving a vision. I'm not seeing things, but I have this vision. To me, mental health is a big issue. I'll talk about more of that in a second. Let me give you some numbers. Figures can lie, liars can figure, but these are numbers. 26.2% of the American public face mental illness each year. That's 57.7 million people. Suicide is the fourth leading cause of death within our own country. Fourth leading cause of death. more than diabetes, more than cancer, more than strokes. What age group has the highest rate per 100,000 of suicide? Anybody want to guess? No. White men over 65. What is the highest growing rate of suicide? White men 42 to 45, 47 to 52. 9.5% of adolescents will be diagnosed having a mood disorder this year. 14.8 million adolescents will have major depression. So you have 14.8 million people are depressed, so 60 million people are affected. That's a lot of people. So let me get close on time here. Let me talk about vision for ministry. The United Church of Christ has a program called Accessible to All, A to A, which is making worship accessible to all people. Physical illnesses, emotional illnesses, developmental problems, strokes, vision. It's making worship accessible. I've been to 2 of the meetings. Sadly, I was the only person from Penn Central who went, which is a sad commentary. Not that I was there, but I was the only one there. But church accessibility is what it's about. To me, it's about faith accessibility. It's not about do we make ramps to let wheelchairs in. It isn't about do we have hearing devices for those who have hearing problems, do we have large print bulletins. That stuff is relatively easy. It's structural. It's bring in a carpenter. It's really about numbers. But how do we make faith accessible? That's the thing. How do we create a place where mental illness is talked about, where ministries are created that can touch the lives of the men and women, the families, the children who are affected by it? I'm not talking about getting a church full of mentally ill people, although, frankly, we could all raise our hands because we've all been there. I mean, I'm 309.28 about my mom's death, and I was 300.4 for my life. I mean, I'll gladly tell you where I am. I mean, 14 years of therapy to undo my own life. I'll be really blunt. I faced severe mental illness, no, but chronic, yes. It's about us. The people out there who face mental illness are not that different from who we are. But can we as a church imagine ministries? The United Church of Christ has a new office for mental health ministries. They have so much that we could do if we wanted to make the world a more hopeful place. So as a church, my challenge is, what is our next vision? I'm on the profile committee, the church. And I know, having looked for churches, if we cannot define clearly to a candidate, this is what we want to do, they will not look at us. Pastors want to lead. They don't want to spend their first 2 years figuring out where the destination is. So I wonder what would happen if we talked about mental health ministry. We might not ever do it, but I wonder what would happen if we talked about it. Nancy Keogh has a great book, which I want to do a book study about. She's a Catholic nun psychiatrist from up in Boston that I worked with. And it's literally stories from her spiritual support group. What would happen if we made this a place where people who are facing mental illness could come and worship once a month at a worship service that was supportive and caring? A place where parents could come to talk about what it's like to have mentally ill children, where people could come to learn about their faith. A place where people will be asked not, what is your diagnosis, which is what their doctors ask them, the therapist asks them, but who are you and how's your life? So my vision is that. We've been O&A for 10 years. In the history of this issue, O&A is a piece of cake versus mental health ministry. O&A is a policy statement. We are O&A. I will never be gay, but I might have a stroke. Mental health ministry is much more intimate than O&A is. It's much more complicated because it requires us to do more than be welcoming. It causes us to reach out and bring in. Those are my ideas. Mental illness is a huge issue. I mean, Robin and I both spend days and nights living with the mentally ill and working with them. So you've heard my story, a little bit of my story, a bit of my ideas. Now I want you to take a moment to hear a story.
Good morning. I gotta say I'm nervous about this. I'm usually up here in a comical way, but today I'm here as well. I'm on personal school. So what is Jean Pauli, Richard Dreyfuss, Ben Stiller, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and myself, Ellen Carmen. We live bipolar. So I'm on the faces of just talking. I agree what you said about shoulders down, your shoulders up. It's easier for me to tell someone they're dead than to tell them I have nothing. So I'm standing up here to try to help the conversations stay straight. I was diagnosed with bipolar in 2002. I definitely had my ups and downs with the disease. One reason I'm up here is because of the negative comments that I hear. I'm sure you sitting here, you can listen to the ones that you've heard. I went on a website that actually listed 250 negative comments for mental illness. And there was some I never heard of. However, there was a lot I did. Isn't one of these comments too many? By using these comments, we stay silent. You're unsafe for me to talk to. So, kind of wrote down maybe a couple things that will help me and others not to stay silent and to let you just know. You're willing to listen to me without judgment. Sometimes you talk to when you're talking, you're going to hear stuff you don't like. Don't panic. As long as I'm talking about what I'm feeling, we're probably moving in the right direction. Acknowledge that you don't know how I feel, but you're there to help in different ways. Just hanging out and being in my corner can be the biggest help of all. If you know that there are people out there that you care about struggling with mental illness, don't you be afraid to start the conversation. It might go easier for me if you initiate it and I open up. There's an author, PastorChris.Faith, she writes, I recognize that my recovery